Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us today for the latest edition of It's a Peer-to-Peer World virtual conference. My name is Amanda Cole. I'm the editor-in-chief at Nonprofit Pro, and I'm delighted to join you as the MC for today's conference. The conference is brought to you by your hosts. They've come together to share their unique experience and knowledge with you today. We have expanded the conference this year and are including additional guests, additional great sessions brought to you by our sponsors. This is the first year we expanded the conference to 5 days. When you registered for the main conference, you should have received login info for each of the 10 a.m. kickoff calls. And then from there, you can choose your own adventure by deciding what other sessions you wish to attend. Please note that if you did not register for one of the sessions available today and would like to attend, visit peertopeerworld.com and register for the session to receive a unique link to attend that session. If it's not on your calendar and you don't receive an email an hour prior to its start time, then please double check to make sure you are registered for that session or activity. Peer-to-Peer World is back for its 5th and final Friday of P2P content, including the 5th installment of P2P email communications workshop, which is covering execution, analytics, and adjustments today at 11:30 a.m. This afternoon, learn about corporate matching gifts at 1 p.m., participate in a virtual walk at 2, and discover how the Miami Dolphins Challenge Cancer event has embraced hybrid fundraising at 2:30. And to wrap up today and the P2P World Conference, discover how to redefine gamification to increase revenue at 4. A few housekeeping notes. We are recording the session, so it will be available to review afterward. Please be sure to post all your questions in the Q&A area, and we'll address those at the end of the session. We may answer some in the chat, so look out for that as well. And finally, please complete the survey at the end of the session for your chance to win some swag from our friends at Halo. This session is titled Live Events. Let's go. Here with me is Jillian Strands, Director of Business Development for Event 360, who will share strategies and tactics to re-engage participants and optimize the event experience. Again, during the session, please feel free to submit any questions you may have through the questions tab in your Zoom control panel, and Jillian will answer those toward the end of the session. Again, the session is being recorded and will be made available after today's conference. And with that, I'll turn it over to Jillian.
Thanks, Amanda. Hi, everyone. Good morning. Thank you so much for joining us for the 5th and final day of the Peer-to-Peer World Conference. Event 360 is proud to be hosting this conference along with a whole host of other players, bringing together some really fantastic peer-to-peer industry content for you all. I know I've enjoyed the workshops on e-communications so far that the Susan G. Komen team have shared. Our expert Joanne Collins was able to participate in week 2. And I have loved the charge walks and runs. I took that first run with the charge team and the team at Peer-to-Peer World to kick off the event. And we're excited to help close out the event today. If you haven't had a chance to attend one of the virtual walks, make sure you carve out some time today to do that. And I look forward to hearing our friends at Fundraising speak later today during the 4 o'clock session. So before we dive in, who am I and what makes me qualified to speak with you all today? As Amanda mentioned, my name is Jillian Strands. I am the Director of Business Development at Event 360. And our team at Event 360 has been planning, producing, and promoting peer-to-peer fundraising events for the past 18 years. I, as part of the Event 360 team, have been here for about 15 years, and I've worn so many hats, from fundraising coach to IT specialist to project manager. So I really love seeing all of the pieces of peer-to-peer fundraising events from very beginning to end come together for an incredible experience. In my role as Business Development Director, I now have the honor of working with our partners across the country in helping support their events. Our team, like yours at Event 360, has spent the last 18 months going through some pretty uncertain territory, going from 50 events originally on our calendar in 2020 to 0 was quite the shock. But as many of our partners are getting back out into live events in 2021 and looking to 2022 to expand their series or their event portfolios, our team is so excited to share with you some of our learnings from the past year. That includes our work with multiple nonprofit organizations and different types of peer-to-peer fundraising events, as well as our own series we concepted, created, launched, and piloted the 5x5K for Good. Okay, so let's dive in. Live events, let's go. In this session, I hope to share with you first a quick overview of some of the industry considerations that I know all of us as peer-to-peer fundraising experts are thinking about as we go from 2020 into 2021 and beyond into next year. The core piece that I want to talk with you all about today is the planning considerations for returning to live events. My goal is to share all sorts of examples with you about how we combine smart planning, innovative technology to really try to enhance or optimize the participant experience, and participant engagement as we return to live events both this fall and into 2022. It's an approach that we like to call Live Plus. Don't worry, I will save time for questions at the end, so hit me with what you've got. And we'll also be sure to share how we're keeping our team safe on the road as we return to live. So we know that it has been a challenging year. Like you, we have been innovating in real time and solving for all of these new realities. We're also taking advantage of new possibilities to create even more rewarding and effective peer-to-peer experiences for our participants and fundraisers. When we take a step back and look at everything that's happened in the past 18 months, it's so important to consider that consumer behavior has shifted in fundamental ways. You have to think about our industry and the fact that our peer-to-peer fundraisers, their lives don't exist in a bubble, right? We provide to them experiences that exist in the greater context of how they are interacting in their world. For us, we know that this means hybrid options for peer-to-peer fundraising are here to stay. But we like to think of hybrid as Live Plus, with the live experience being the anchor for human connection. A recent McKinsey study on how COVID is changing our consumer behavior makes 3 important points that are relevant to our peer-to-peer fundraising industry. First, that COVID-19 has transformed consumer lives. The speed at which we're adopting new digital technologies has covered a decade in days. I know that's true. I know for both our work lives as well as our home lives, we've seen this kind of rapidly evolve. Second, that behavior changes are not linear, and that their stickiness is going to depend on the satisfaction with their new experiences. So think of stickiness as forced behavior times satisfaction. These new behavioral changes, are they going to stick? And finally, third, the future is now. Players should prepare. Following consumers in their new decision journeys when you start to market and communicate your return to live events is going to be critical. So what does that mean for our industry? There's a couple of things that bubble up for us as we think about all of the challenges facing our nonprofit clients, everything that we're seeing in the industry at large. As we look at how events have evolved and transitioned through cancellation to virtualization to returning to live events, we know that the most loyal supporters stuck with nonprofit organizations during the pandemic. And a lot of times, for many of us, that meant doubling down on their commitment to fundraising, right? We see this with the trend lines. We've all been conditioned over the past decade to track certain metrics, average fundraising, average donation size, number of participants, total dollars raised. And so these graphs and these charts, I know your teams have come to know and love, well, love, hate, right? They might look a lot different as we transition not only through this period, but into the future. And for some of that, that looked like higher fundraising averages for our participants because it's the most loyal supporters who stuck with nonprofits. Event transactions went frictionless and contactless. So the technology and process upgrades that maybe in the past your team was blue skying, right? They were maybe on their want to have list, suddenly and very quickly became need to have. I know there have been great presenters talking about all sorts of peer-to-peer fundraising technologies, and a lot of them have evolved very quickly. And those, adoption rates by our consumers or participants, they're really ripe for adoption because in their consumer lives, transactions went frictionless. So we come to expect that when we return to our nonprofit peer-to-peer fundraising interactions as well. Finally, virtual and hybrid models wiped geographic boundaries off the map. Anyone could participate for your organization from anywhere, and they did. And we're going to touch on some of this in our examples as we dive into some specifics around virtual technology. But, I think this has been an incredible opportunity. And as we shift focus into 2022, it's going to look a lot like, okay, we have all of these people, all of these eyeballs. What now? As we return to live, how do we keep these folks as part of our Live Plus experience? Even though the world has changed, our desire and need for human connection feels more important than ever. As we look to 2022, how do you recapture the participants who didn't stick with you? On the flip side, how do you satisfy and reward the participants who did, who showed up bigger and better than ever? How do you convert and keep these new participants you may have attracted, both virtual and hybrid? How do you meet higher expectations and requirements around technology, transactions, and how we bring people together as a community? It's a lot to take on. We know that. We've been living it with you for the past year and a half. With less resources and more urgency than ever to hit your peer-to-peer fundraising targets, coming together and sharing these learnings and these collaborative sessions is so important. We all have a heavy lift. A while back, earlier this spring, we partnered with our friends at Op3 to put out a survey of the peer-to-peer industry and just how folks were feeling. And only 52% of nonprofits felt that they had the necessary in-house resources to produce their events, and 32% were unsure. 33% said they were unlikely to hire back internal staff when they returned to live events. And yet these expectations for what 2022 looks like and this excitement around the return to live isn't going away. 48% said that their number one challenge in the past year was their reduced staff and resources. So with that in mind, my hope today is to share tips, tricks, examples, tactics, a whole bunch of what we're doing, what we have been doing out there producing live events this year. So you can take some of these ideas and make this transition a little easier and make that lift a little bit lighter. As you look to 2022 and returning to live events, you need this 360-degree perspective, right? I know on the one hand, we want to accelerate the reintroduction of live events and think big. People are craving events. We want to get back out there. They are ready. That said, we have to take the time to think it through, making sure that the investments that we're making in our peer-to-peer programs are smart and balancing with that the need to keep everyone safe and healthy and satisfied. You may need to augment your internal staff with deep expertise to deliver more boots on the ground today. If you're out there producing events this fall, we know how tricky staffing has become. We're seeing it when we go into markets in our own cities. We're helping nonprofits with this as they're running into issues. But that said, we can't just think short term. We have to think about building that comprehensive, clear operational playbook for future events and staff. Really documenting our knowledge so that it will carry us through into 2022. We need to re-engage and reactivate participants as we return to live events with some of their most loved familiar traditions, right? So most nonprofit organizations that we work with have some sort of mission moment, some sort of activity that's truly unique to their event experience. And our participants are excited to do that. So as we re-engage with these participants, how do we continue to bring that to life while also innovating? Right. On the flip side, we do want to innovate. We want to introduce new experiences, whether that's second screen programming or, hybrid enhancements or just surprises for our participants on events since we haven't seen them for 2 event seasons that will create that enthusiasm, that loyalty that will ultimately drive more lifetime value for that fundraiser. And finally, we want to integrate new technology and innovation into our live event strategy and support. That said, we also have to train our participants on how to navigate that tech and these, new transactions that we're asking them to do seamlessly and happily. And so, what this looks like as we've seen it play out over the spring and fall event seasons for us is, I said to you, it's going contactless, it's going frictionless. This is how people consume things in their lives. This is how they want to interact. Keep in mind, we sat home for 18 months, right? And our phones trained us how to do all of that. Now, as we bring people back to this live event, they're used to it being done a certain way. Maybe they're used to packet pickup. Maybe they're used to standing in that check-in line, right? And so when we introduce some of these new contactless technologies and transactions on event, our users may stumble. They may need a little help. And so we're going to talk through some real life examples of how that played out, how we worked through it on some of our events this past spring. Live events are back, and they may be more complex than before, but maybe richer than ever. I don't know about you, but our team has definitely missed bringing our communities together and having these incredible experiences. We'll work through any challenge in our path because we know at the end of the day that event day is worth it. It's important to pause before we dig into real examples and think about why this return to live events is so vital. For us at Event 360, I know for my teams, it's all about connection. It's all about bringing our communities back together. In preparation for, this presentation today, I've been talking with some folks in the industry, some peers, some past clients, some friends, and I recently spoke with one regional level nonprofit professional who said, I don't think you understand. We have to have a live event in November. Our community needs it. And I felt that, they didn't have the option to postpone again. This community, if they didn't provide a live experience, they felt like they may never get them back. And so that's not unlike what we're hearing from a lot of nonprofits who want to bring these communities back together. The connection is why we're here. We're hardwired to connect with others. That's what gives meaning to our lives, according to Brene Brown, but certainly to our peer-to-peer programs in the nonprofit industry. But that sense of urgency, that desire to get back out there is often immediately followed in these conversations with these planning considerations, these questions, these challenges, hurdles, whatever you want to call them. I've got a few buckets here that I feel like continue to bubble up for us as we're out having these conversations with clients and potential partners. The first is safety, especially when we're talking about fall of 2021. How do we keep our people safe? How do we keep our participants safe? How do we keep our staff safe? Right? That is a planning consideration that I know all of you are facing as you return to live events. The second is a whole bucket of concerns around sites. When we're returning to live events, we need a place to have them, right? That was something that was so beautiful about virtualizing events. You didn't have to work with any cranky jurisdictions. You didn't have to deal with any, weird site layouts. There were all sorts of benefits. But as we get back out there, organizations are worried about competition. It's not just nonprofits and peer-to-peer run walks that are coming back. The market is becoming saturated with this return to live events. People want to get back out there and connect. And so the market is springing up and kind of reacting to that desire. So you may have more trouble, or you may need more time securing the sites that you've had in the past. There's also evolving requirements, right? We're hearing from organizations who the goalposts keep shifting. The requirements keep changing. The attendee levels that maybe were allowed to be larger went smaller again, and now they're growing again. There's all sorts of requirements, additional sanitation, social distancing. These are things that organizations are thinking through in terms of planning. And finally, the experience. Once we get past the absolute musts, the safety and having a place to have our event, then it comes down to experience, right? What is the experience we're providing to our participants, taking all of those other changes, shifts, and tweaks into consideration? Are we still going to be able to bring our communities together and connect in a live space when we're still supposed to, be a little bit apart? It's a lot. So I want to spend the next 25 minutes talking about a couple of key things, right? Event planning, innovative technology optimization, and participant engagement. And as we dive into this, I'm going to share just a bunch of examples that actually have happened. For me, I like to learn, lessons learned. We want to share with you some of our lessons learned, things that worked, and a couple of things that maybe didn't, that we have to adjust. But my goal today in this session is for you to be able to take some of this back to your own peer-to-peer program and walk away with something and say, yes, this is going to save us money, save us time, enhance our experience, something you can use. So the first topic, I've got 2 slides here of examples around smart event planning. And for each of these, I'm sharing events that we produced for our amazing partners at the AIDS Healthcare Foundation. The first was back in early spring. This was in the midst of everything with COVID still going on in South Florida. And so this was our first big live event like this back out the gate. And so we got to try and test all sorts of safety protocols and event planning changes that we've implemented now across all of our projects. And then after that, I'll talk a little bit about the Atlanta AIDS Walk and 5K run and music festival that took place in Atlanta in the end of September. So, how has that changed? What are we still seeing? What are we still doing? So when we're talking about smart event planning, and, if you've read our blog, you've kind of seen our mantra, right? Time, space, and volume. For us, we know that there's a whole lot that we can't control right now as event planners, but there are things we can control. And so we try to focus on those. How do we take what used to be a very condensed site, what used to be a ton of people in a shared space with really high volume of participants, and switch up the time and space so that we can have more room, so that we can come together safely? This is one of the hardest things, I think, for us as peer-to-peer event management professionals, because you probably have that tried and true tradition that you love. Maybe it's a breakfast for your top fundraisers, right? Maybe it's a memorial garden. Maybe it's a photo op, but there are things that we do to bring our communities together. And now I'm asking you to think about it differently, how we create a great experience still, but maybe without that congestion. So the first thing we did at the Florida AIDS Walk and Music Festival, you can see here, twofold. The first was social distancing pods. So you can see this photo here on the beach. We actually created squares on the beach for the music festival on our event site, and asked people to stay with the people they came with in groups of no more than 4 to 6 people. So right out the gate, we've introduced this new element. Instead of everyone being crammed together, you can see here that it really gave people a little more control over who they were with in the crowd. Then we combined that with a rolling start time. So one of the most incredible aspects of this event is the walk, the AIDS walk that takes place up and down the beach, one of the main drags in Fort Lauderdale. It really brings visibility to this organization and the incredible community that they serve. But we needed to do that safely. And so by kind of dismissing each row or each set of pods one at a time, we were able to control that start line flow. Now, there wasn't a time to run aspect to this. So I know some of you are still working through those considerations with your race directors and corrals and cues and all sorts of, things there. For us, it was a walk. So we had the opportunity to release certain groups at certain times, and it worked. People listened. They were so excited to be back out together with a live experience that they were willing to work with us and play along. And it ended up being fantastic. The other two things you'll see here are our grab and go station. So we eliminated the check-in and registration process we've used for the past 10 years, right? We don't want paper being handed back and forth. We don't want iPads being handed back and forth. Really what we wanted is for people to be able to walk up, scan the QR code, check in, get their dog tag and go. Like this needed to be contactless and streamlined. So you can see here, we have a tent with a QR code signage on there that folks could easily use. We also had masks and hand sanitizer sitting out so they could grab and go as they entered the venue. For the contactless donation station, you can see a tent here. Rather than accept any cash or check on event, we simply printed these amazing tent walls with QR codes for each of the incredible beneficiaries for folks to stop on their way in or on their way out for the walk, use the QR codes to make an instant donation. So this was incredible. The one thing I'll say, right? So these were all fantastic innovations. These are smart event plans. This is where we also learned that it's important to train our folks on new technology. Some of these participants have been doing this walk for 15 years. They don't read their emails. They show up, they know the drill, they're ready to go. And now we're asking them to check in on a mobile device, and it takes a little bit of help desking, right? And so I would encourage any of you considering contactless check-in, contactless donations, to just be prepared with a friendly staff person to support. Have a plan B, have a backup plan. 85% of your folks are going to know exactly what to do, but the rest may need a little extra love, and that's okay. We took some of our learnings from our event in Florida and applied them to our event in Atlanta this past September. So for the Atlanta AIDS Walk and Music Festival, we created an incredible site in Piedmont Park and brought along social distancing squares. So this was an easy and frankly, really manageable way to create social distancing pods that were maybe a little bit of a lighter lift than what we did in Florida. You can see here our team putting out chalk lines there all around the site. You can also see them here under that beautiful shade structure that we used for this music festival event. These were great. It allowed folks to stay with the people they came with. They were a little bit bigger so that they could stay with their team or their group. And it really worked out. People really liked it. There was a yoga experience prior to the walk and run starting. And so folks were able to claim their pod and do some morning stretching with us, which was fantastic. And you can see here that we continued not only the contactless check-in, but a lot of signage here encouraging face masks and social distancing. That's not something we necessarily see going away in 2022, especially social distancing and encouragement to mask. We'll continue to look and see how that evolves. But signage has been a really fantastic way for us to communicate that. And most organizations, I feel like that is a tricky decision, whether to require or encourage face masks. But at the end of the day, we found that our populations, especially that are dealing with immunocompromised populations, have been incredibly open to doing whatever we ask them on site to optimize everyone's day. Okay, so that's just some of our event planning learnings from these two, not only these two events, but I could go on and on with the other events we've produced this spring and this fall. If you have questions about any elements of your event or anything you're hearing from jurisdictions, be sure to drop them in the chat and I will definitely save time at the end. Moving on to innovative technology, this is really all about enhancing the participant experience. I don't believe in technology for technology's sake, right? But technology is an incredible tool to take a participant experience and bring it to the next level. So I'm going to talk about two examples here with you, today, just from events. But the first is really, I think, one of our most innovative event experiences to date. We at Event 360 built the 5x5K for Good, which is a collaborative event peer-to-peer fundraising model where we, Event 360, built this incredible event with 5 start lines all around a major metro market. We used Dallas, Denver, and Chicago as our cities this year, and participants have 24 hours to hit them all. So this event wasn't just a live event that we said, okay, how do we make this virtual? This is an event that was built, concepted, and created during COVID, really with technology forward thinking. We knew if we were going to bring people together during a pandemic, and we piloted this, keep in mind, back in 2020, that everything would have to be contactless. This really pushed us to explore the limits of technology. And so what we found is that it could be done. Running wasn't canceled, right? Running was naturally socially distanced. It was something people could do. So we really manipulated time, space, and volume to try to create an event experience that was fantastic, technology driven, and naturally socially distant. This included digital check-in. So this digital check-in brought to us in part by our partners at Fundraising, who are going to speak later today. This really took the check-in experience to the next level. So this is a step above maybe the QR codes that we're using on some other traditional events. This allowed every participant to have their own personal QR code. And when we scanned them in, our staff could check them into one of 5 different sites, and the system would automatically deploy a text message to their phone with a link to the route. So, that's kind of taking the traditional QR code model where everyone's scanning the same system to a form and flipping it on its head. It's really personalized. It includes the personal QR code, multi-process check-in that we manage on our own devices, and the outbound text push. So it's really incredible technology. This was vital because we didn't support our routes. We couldn't have cheering stations. We couldn't have people out there. This was kind of a solo run experience. And so by putting a link to the route on their phone in Run Go, this allowed our participants to walk up to the start line, put in their earbuds, push play, and follow a GPS route with turn-by-turn directions in their ear. So when I say digital route, that's what I'm referencing. We used RunGo's technology to give our participants an incredible turn-by-turn experience that played over any music or Spotify playlist or podcast that they were listening to. Once we had nailed the live experience, we expanded the experience to Live Plus. This includes our live virtual broadcast for our virtual participants. This was powered through our friends at Charge Running. They did 5 live broadcasts over a 24-hour period where our 5x5K participants from all across the country, let's say you didn't live in Denver, Dallas, or Chicago, right? Folks could register and try to complete all 5 in their own neighborhood. If you've had the pleasure of joining one of the walks through the Peer-to-Peer World Conference, you know the technology I'm talking about. Our virtual participants were able to join a live broadcast, go out on a run in their own neighborhood, but joined by a live coach, one of our MCs, and all the other virtual 5x5Kers who were participating and interacting in the chat. The coaches can keep track of how far you've gone, give shout outs, when you hit that halfway point or that mile marker, just like you would on any live run. Play music, keep the energy up. It was an incredible experience. And you can see here the high fives in the bottom right photo. Those are actually our virtual folks. They were, nowhere near each other, but they post for these photos in the chat. looking like they were giving each other high fives from across the country and cheering each other on. And then finally, I did talk a little bit about texting with the technology. There's so many aspects to texting we could talk about, but texting we have found is so much better than email when it comes to communicating complicated logistics to our participants, right? And 5Ks in 24 hours with 5 different start lines qualifies as complicated. But we found that texting was an incredibly efficient way to communicate with our folks, the important information we needed them to have so that they weren't digging through emails looking for their personal QR code or any of the event information. We were really proud of this experience. We had 16 charity partners join us and use this event as a fundraiser for their own nonprofit organizations. They kept every dollar that they raised. We're excited to build upon some of these technology enhancements as we look to 2022. Now, innovative technology doesn't just have to be for concepts that were created to be technology first, right? We can also include little enhancements to our existing peer-to-peer programs. I've shared some photos here from the Multiple Myeloma Research Foundation's Team for Cure's 5K event. So the MMRF has returned to live events this fall. Our team is so proud to be producing that 7-event series. But there were certain modifications that we wanted to make on site that luckily we had tried and tested that would help, bring some added layer of safety and social distancing to this event. So just a couple of photos here that show how we, brought these big tent walls with QR codes for check-in to this event to really eliminate any gathering or lines. Our participants in this series were very used to checking in the morning of, whether they were a walker or runner, and getting their t-shirt on event. And so we knew that in order to bring this community together safely, we wanted to eliminate as much of that as possible. And this is a really simple one you all can take back to your programs this year and think about a creative way to continue this into 2022. I will say the biggest benefit that I personally saw on this event, because it was in Chicago and I was there, wasn't even just the social distancing, it was the experience for the participants. It eliminates the lines. It eliminates the need to do it. We have a self-service bib station. You can see here folks stopping to get their safety pins and their bibs. It really just takes that waiting out of the equation. And in this new world where we're so used to having everything instantly at our fingertips, I think this aligns very well with evolving consumer behavior. Let participants check themselves in, let them grab their own bib, and let them get on to the fun part, meeting up with their teams, stretching, enjoying the music, enjoying your sponsors. Okay, just doing a quick time check. I've got 20 minutes left. Don't worry, I promise I will save time for questions. The next thing I wanted to talk about is participant engagement. So this is kind of the third piece to the puzzle. How do we continue fostering connection in this Live Plus world? So we know all the tips and tricks to foster connection on event, right? All of us who have worked in this industry for over, the past 5, 10, 15 years have seen all sorts of great mission moments, team building moments, fundraiser recognition evolve on our peer-to-peer events. But as we continue with Live Plus, how do we extend some of that connection to our participants who may be joining us remotely? As many of the other presenters I'm sure have talked about, hybrid, virtual, whatever you want to call it, it's not going away. So let's make sure we're keeping that participant experience in mind as well. So I'm going to talk a little about the 5x5K again here first, because we did have those virtual participants joining us. And some of the ways that we tried to extend this incredible experience to them when they were like running in their own backyard in Dyer, Indiana, like myself. The first is in-app interaction. So if you have an interactive app, for us, that was Charge Running. You can see the image here of our participants cheering each other on with photos and encouraging words in the Charge Running app. But, I know a lot of organizations have also developed their own interactive apps, which is incredible, right? And so as you're thinking about extending a participant experience to your folks joining remotely, how do you make it interactive? How do you give them a way to be experiencing the event with others in real time from their own homes? I think this is going to continue to be incredibly important, and it just makes the experience for folks so much richer than just watching a Facebook Live. Live stream and second screen. So one of the biggest things about peer-to-peer fundraising events is obviously that ceremony. There's so many great companies and organizations out there bringing their experience to life for their virtual programs. But as we return to live, how do we continue to provide that second screen experience and live stream to our participants at home, or create something interactive on their phones while they're at the event to continue to integrate even more impact messaging, mission messaging, really rounding out the experience for our participants. Event kits. I've got a couple of examples here. On this slide, I want to talk about the 5x5K event kit. If you've heard me speak at conferences 2 years ago, you probably heard me talk about multisensory experiences, things that are interactive, taste, touch, smell. How do we create multisensory experiences on event? And the event kit is a great opportunity to do that for our folks who can't join us in person. One interactive element we included in the 5x5K virtual event kit were fun stickers. Our folks, whether they were in person or at home, for each of their 5Ks, they got a different little badge, a little different sticker that they could put and mark as completed when they wrote in their time for that 5K. And so our participants at home also got those stickers in the mail. It was something to do. It was something to have as a shared experience, whether you were in person or remote. And then finally, texting is cultivation. I know I talked about texting as like a logistical tool that people will actually read as opposed to, we know sometimes their email. Texting is also a great cultivation tool. Some of our best feedback, some of our most enthusiastic supporters, once we use a two-way texting platform like Hustle to start communicating with them, we can't get them to stop texting us. They love it. They want to tell us all of their experiences, share their selfies, ask us their questions. That's the preferred method of communication for a lot of people now. And so I know a lot of organizations have introduced outbound texting. If you're not exploring two-way interactive texting as part of your cultivation package, especially for your team captains and fundraisers, that's a great tool to take forward with you into 2022. I have a few more examples here from just this past weekend. Our team at Event 360 worked with the team at the Susan G. Komen 3-Day to create 3-Day Nation, which is an extension of the traditional 3-day program, which is a 60-mile endurance walk. For those folks who weren't going to be joining us live in San Diego this fall, the 3-day team created an incredible immersive experience that lasts over 3 weekends in October. And one of the great things about this, you can see here, is that our 3-Day Nation folks who did reach their fundraising minimum received this incredible kit of all sorts of fun goodies in the mail to really round out their experience. So things like pennants, swag, wearables that they could take out while they were walking their own 20 miles in their neighborhood. You see a little tea light here. That's very symbolic to this community and part of the ceremony that they do on site to honor survivors. So we wanted to send a little bit of that love and connection to our folks at home. Event kits are going to continue, I think, to be an incredible way to encourage fundraising and to provide immersive experiences to participants who, again, maybe because they can't or simply don't want to join you live, but still want to fundraise for your organization. So as we're thinking about how do we keep the new people around who joined us virtually, who can't get to our event because they joined us from a completely different location, think about things that you can provide to them that maybe are low cost, but also high impact because they're interactive. They add to their experience. You can see here the live stream, a little clip of, the ceremony that everybody got to share in together, as well as our staff behind the scenes, working with the team at the 3-day to ensure everything went off without a hitch. So, again, fostering connection is going to continue to be so important. I'm excited to see all the incredible things you all do with your peer-to-peer programs as you return to live. I'm also excited to see these new kind of complementary programs spin up that I think will extend the geographic reach of our peer-to-peer fundraising programs, as well as ultimately, hopefully, raise more dollars for the incredible missions we serve. Okay, so that's my show and share. This is me giving you everything we've learned this past year. As we head into next year, I think we already have well over 40 events. No, we have well over, we're getting up close to 100 events on our roster for next year. So, we're going to be very busy. We're going to take some of these best practices with us in our big return to live. If you have questions about any of this, please feel free to drop it in the chat. And then I just want to share one final thing with you before we move on to Q&A. Hands down, one of the number one things I'm hearing from folks who are overseeing peer-to-peer fundraising programs and returning to live events this fall is, how do we keep our teams safe? So this is a little show and share, a gift from me to you. This isn't necessarily a plan you have to follow, but rather me telling you this is what our team as event professionals is doing to keep our team safe as we head back out to produce live events across the country this fall. So we have a health and safety plan that we think is best in show and is going to allow us to continue serving our clients and keep our teams and our clients safe. The first is obviously supplies and screening. So we provide face masks, work gloves, hand sanitizer, wipes to all of our staff, right? Everybody gets a kit of supplies when they're being asked to go out and produce a 5K or any other kind of event. We also obviously continue to do symptom screening and temperature checks daily, right? So that looks like our event lead keeping in contact with everyone, oftentimes over text, to make sure that they are symptom-free. We took that a step further this fall, and we're also implementing our testing and travel plan. So all of our staff take a rapid PCR or PCR test prior to traveling. So if we have 5 team members going out to staff an event, they all have to be tested before they get on a plane. We also have 1 team member standing by for every event who's also testing in case someone on our team does unfortunately test positive and we need to send someone in their place. So our backup plans have backup plans. Finally, in the case of a positive result, that staff will be replaced with another staff person, and we fly antigen tests, self-testing kits to every market that we're in, and our staff tests every morning, 30 minutes prior to arriving on site. I know this seems like a lot, but we have a responsibility to our partners and our clients to provide the services that they've asked us to perform. And knowing that we have these procedures and backup plans in place, I think has given our team as well as our partners the confidence that they need to move forward with live events safely. Finally, on event mitigation, we've changed the way we work together as a team. We limit the number of people in our command center. We keep a separate porta-john for staff whenever possible. We keep our walkie-talkies for the entire event. We don't, check them in and check them out every night. We're assigned one, and that's it for the duration. And our staff has to socially distance and avoid eating together indoors when out in groups, which is so sad because we are a virtual company and we love coming together and going out together. But for right now, we're keeping it super safe, staying socially distanced, eating on our own, not dining indoors. Little changes, things that we have always done are looking a little bit different on event, but it's worth it in the end. So I'm sharing this with you, not to say this is absolutely what everyone should be doing, but rather some of these are very simple tweaks. And if your leadership, your stakeholders are looking to you and saying, what is our plan? How are we keeping our team safe? Steal from our plan. These kinds of layered steps, multiple layers of mitigation really do work. And some of them are cost effective and easy to implement. At the end of the day, they're all worth it. And with that, we have 10 minutes for questions. So please feel free to drop anything you've got in the chat. I'm happy to answer.
Okay. We do have one here. How are you creating connection for P2P events amid the shift in events after COVID?
Right. So the connection, I think, really comes down to two things. You can either find ways to keep some of your traditions alive without actually physically touching each other, right? So part of it is going back to these mission moments, these traditions, these things that your participants really love, and trying to, manipulate time, space, and volume to keep that overarching experience alive. So you can shift what you used to do that's truly meaningful to your participants and bring it forward, or you can create something entirely new and surprise them. So I think a good example of, keeping a time honored tradition alive, to really foster connection on event, could be, on the Florida AIDS Walk and Music Festival, we had to figure out a way to continue to have that entertainment piece. That event used to just be a walk and run. And we went through a huge undertaking almost 10 years ago to create this incredible concert on the beach. This is the experience they love to have. But we couldn't have everybody, super close together on site. So that connection really came in creating more social distance, because what wasn't important was that the proximity or, physical space was so key. It was that they got to be there celebrating, dancing, having that experience together again. Part of the connection, I think, for another example with 3-Day Nation, on the box that we showed, there's this incredible on-event experience where we honor participants. And for our folks who couldn't join us, we want to keep that tradition alive, right? And so sending them a little piece, an actual interactive piece of that ceremony where they can experience that connection with their other folks around the country who are having that same experience, that is connectedness. So I think that's one way to approach it. On the flip side, new surprises. The Charge app for our 5x5K participants, there's nothing quite like seeing 50 people who've never met each other before in the chat, busting their butts to run 5Ks in 24 hours, cheering each other on, posting pictures of each other's dogs. By the end of the 5x5, they knew each other's dogs' names. They knew each other's kids' names. They were coming together to have this incredible connection and experience. And while that was, for a 5x5K running event, that app interactivity and interconnectedness is something you can take and apply to your community's mission, to, maybe your team captains, maybe to your fundraisers. There's all sorts of ways that you can take the technology that enabled us to do that and create that connectedness with that tech. I hope that helps.
Very cool, very cool. So the next one we have here is, are you requiring staff and key volunteers to be vaccinated? And also, did you get any backlash on your safety measures? This person saying they are getting negative feedback about protocols.
Yeah, so I think that's really an organizational decision. Obviously, we have a vaccinated staff. We test, we mask, like we are layers upon layers of safety. That said, I know each organization has to make that choice for themselves. So you can see some organizations that we work with are actually not requiring volunteers to be vaccinated, but strongly encouraging it. I know it's a really difficult decision. We provide our services either way. We work with our volunteers either way, and we try to apply the same social distancing, masking strongly recommended, all of the things that we do to mitigate on event with our participants, we apply those to our volunteers as well. We have worked with clients who have kind of started down the path of asking all of their volunteers to be vaccinated. And I think that gets them 80% of the way there. And then there are exceptions or, redirection of those volunteer efforts when, they can't acquiesce to that request. I know it's hard, you guys. And I think as we continue to move on, hopefully it will become less difficult. But each organization really has had to make that decision for themselves.
Okay. And this one's interesting to see if you have anything on this. Someone's asking if there's any way to incorporate peer-to-peer during regularly scheduled food pantry distribution days.
Peer-to-peer during regularly scheduled food pantry distribution days. So if you're talking about peer-to-peer fundraising, I mean, peer-to-peer can be so many things. It can be recruiting your friends. It can be recruiting more people to bring more food to the food pantry. But I think competition is a great way to foster peer-to-peer as a one and done. So, and please note, I don't work for any food pantries. This is me just spitballing here and sharing ideas. But, you know, for me, I think if you can take some teams, whether those are corporations or employers that are usually involved with your food pantry distribution days, whether those are a couple of key families that are really highly networked, whether those are a couple of like schools that you want to pit against each other at the high school level, and do a 1-day peer-to-peer fundraising DIY, set up a team page for each of those folks, and then put a clock on it, right? Put a clock on it, put that competition out there, because that's going to drive them to ask more people and to tap their networks, right? That's what really the peer-to-peer magic is all about. It's not about how much money you have. It's about how many people do you know, right? Everybody's got something. So I would take a highly connected person who's willing to make the ask and lead a team of people over somebody who just, you know, happens to have a couple of high donors any day. So I would set it up as a competition. I would encourage you to use a teams model, because right there you've got that first captain and then the next layer of team members. Keep it small, test it, see what works, see what doesn't, and take your learnings from there.
Okay. And I'm not seeing any more questions. So if anyone has any last minute questions, throw them in the chat now. Otherwise, is there anything else you wanted to add, Jillian?
No, thank you again to all of you who have worked so hard to put this conference together. Thank you, Amanda. Thank you, Mark at Peer-to-Peer World. We love being a part of this event. Folks, if you haven't had a chance to try the Charge app, be sure to check out the walk. Thanks to every other host who came together to share some amazing content. Our team at Event 360 is here to help. So thanks for spending some time with us on this Friday. If you do work for an organization and you want to talk more about the return to live events, you know, reach out to our team.
All right, great. Well, thank you to Jillian for sharing all her knowledge on live events. Don't forget to complete the brief survey for a chance to win some cool prizes. And we've reached the end of our session. So thanks so much for joining us. Please note that you will be if you will be attending the next session, the P2P email communications session, you will need to log in using that link you received via email when you registered.